All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Maniac Malloy, ESP, Eliot Shorr-Parks. Feels like
What
it's
up?
been forever, man, since I've seen you. I've missed you, dude. We're both a whole lot tanner than
Got
the
to.
last time we talked. I was out at the Memorial in Columbus, Ohio. You've been hitting minicamp, OTAs. You got a nice little base tan going there, Eliot. How do you
Appreciate
feel?
it. Well, look, I mean, it's summertime now. When you go down the shore, if you can't be in shape, you got to be tan. You got to make sure the fat is nice and cooked up. So, yeah, I mean, look, a lot has happened. It's sad the Eagles aren't practicing for 6-7 weeks or whatever it is. But as is always the case with the Eagles, it's never boring. So excited to get into all the stuff that has happened.
It is truly never boring. You guys say it on 94.1 WIP. It's drama guaranteed. I'm going to start off with Jalen and Nick Sirianni. Jalen, when he's talking about Nick Sirianni, it just seems like there's a disconnect there. Talk to us about what your feelings are about Jalen Hurts and his relationship with Nick Sirianni flat out.
Yeah, so I think what you're seeing is some residual effect of what happened last year. When the Eagles made the Super Bowl, almost won the Super Bowl in 2022, you didn't hear anything about Nick and Jalen's relationship. And I think until this team wins, until they go to Brazil and beat the Packers, or they start 4-1 and the offense looks good and they're beating the blitz, you're going to hear about Nick and Jalen. But Jalen didn't help himself with that answer. I think Jalen, and I've said this repeatedly, checks almost every box you want as a person from the franchise quarterback. He represents a team well, easy to root for, super cool, likable guy, hard worker. All those things are true. But he didn't help himself with this answer. The pause when asked about Nick was hard. It was painful to sit through. The answer on the follow-up, it just gave the perception that him and Nick don't get along. And if that's true, it's a major problem, because as good as the Eagles are and as much talent as they have, and they'll step on the field this year and have more talent than almost every team they face. But if the two most important people in the building aren't on the same page, then they're in trouble, because we saw last year that while they were talented last year, drama off the field, and when things start to fall apart, if you're not a tight unit, it can fall apart quickly. So I think Jalen would benefit from giving Nick more support publicly. Nick has always supported Jalen publicly, even through hard times in his career. So I think it's concerning, and I think it could be something that definitely impacts a team this season if they get off to a slow start.
And the thing for me that's just concerning about it is, like, you see guys that are even younger than him, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, stepping up and having the back of Vic Fangio right out of the gate in their first pressers during OTAs. And Jalen just kind of did the complete opposite of them. It was cringe. It was awkward. It was very uncomfortable.
Well, and the job of a franchise quarterback is to represent the team well. And Jalen does that in so many ways. And he is certainly someone that they can be happy as the face of the team. But an issue for the Eagles this offseason, from a messaging perspective, is the perception that Nick isn't involved. Nick's just a puppet head coach. Nick doesn't do anything. What does Nick do, right? That was the big question. It doesn't help when Jalen doesn't answer these questions well. So Jalen gets paid a lot of money because he's good at football and he wins games, and that's why he gets paid. But part of getting $250 million is the other stuff. Like, that's why the Eagles felt confident attaching their franchise to him. And this is an area where he needs to improve.
Jeffrey Lurie and Howie have got to be fit to be tied over this one. But anyways, after watching minicamp, how involved is Nick Sirianni with the Eagles from what you've seen?
I think maybe the most overblown story with this team right now is the Nick and Kellen Moore relationship. Who's doing this? Who's doing that? Whose offense is it? How involved is Nick? It's the same setup in a lot of ways that they have had for the past few years. Nick is not the play caller. Kellen's the play caller. The difference is Kellen Moore now has way more influence over the scheme and all those things. But the vibe I got from being around the Eagles during OTAs, during minicamps, is that any worry about Kellen and Nick not being happy, I didn't get that vibe at all. I think Nick is encouraged and excited to be back. I think Nick likes the idea of being around the whole team. I think he likes Kellen Moore. He trusts Kellen Moore. And I think the biggest thing here is when the Eagles fell apart after 2017 with that Super Bowl, when they went from winning the Super Bowl to winning one playoff game to not winning a playoff game to missing the playoffs, the biggest issue they had, outside of the fact Carson fell apart, but the biggest issue they had was they did not bring enough outside people into the building. They promoted from within. They kept a lot of the same staff. Doug wanted to keep the same staff. I think the smart thing here, and I believe Nick is firmly behind this, is bringing Kellen Moore in gives them a fresh set of eyes. It gives them a fresh scheme. So I don't believe Nick is upset the offense was quote unquote taken from him. I don't think he's been demoted. I think that the setup between Kellen Moore and Nick, we'll talk blue in the face saying it's 70% Kellen and Nick made like, I think it's a situation that's really set up to succeed. And the vibe I get is that it is going to be one that I think will be a good partnership.
Now, with that said, I mean, my biggest thing when they were going back and forth on whether or not Sirianni was going to get canned or not is like, we're in June. We should be excited about this team. We should have, eternal optimism in my mind. It's already starting. Is this going to be something you believe that all year we're going to have to hear about Nick Sirianni, his job, his security, his relationship with the team? What is it going to take for those, headlines to go away?
It's going to take a couple things. The first thing it's going to take is an offense that is good, that plays well. If they go out week 1 against Brazil and the blitz is still an issue, if they play Tampa week 4 and Todd Bowles is once again blitzing Jalen and there's nothing they can do about it, this thing could fall apart quickly from a PR perspective, because there is a lot of built up frustration with this team from last year that will carry over. Now, when will this be completely behind them? It might not be until they win a playoff game. If this team's 10-1 this year, people are going to be sitting there and going, well, we saw what happened last year. And I think it's going to take a full year of them being good, of them not collapsing, of them doing it in the playoffs, of the offense being good. I don't think they have to win a Super Bowl this year. This team can have a successful year if they win 2 playoff games. If they're the number 1 seed, they win a game, and then, obviously it would be unfortunate to have them lose a championship game. But this is about showing that the Nick and Jalen relationship can work for a full year. And I think after what happened last year, there's going to be a lot of skepticism from fans until they see it for a while. It's going to take more than 1 win. It's going to take more than a 5-1 start. It's going to have to take a full year of success. So this drama you're worried about, I think you're right to be worried about it, but it's not going away anytime soon. It's going to be a full season of needing to show it.
It makes the season like just so unenjoyable when it's just high tension and it just all right.
Welcome to Eagles football. It's not the summertime fun activity the Phillies are. Like, the Eagles play with pressure, and when you play with pressure, this is the result of that.
Exactly. So defense, you've been seeing them up close and personal at minicamp. Has the defense been upgraded after watching minicamp so far?
Yeah, I think the Eagles could end up with the top 5 defense this year. I think their defense is going to be outstanding. I think the addition of Vic Fangio is going to be huge. They had talent on the defense. Me and you talked about this leading up to the draft. I think the idea they were devoid of talent on defense was wrong. The issue was they had an atrocious coordinator the second half of the year, and everything fell apart. I think you add Vic Fangio, is he a top 5 coordinator? Maybe not. But he certainly is an experienced guy that knows how to coach defense. I don't think they'll be a disaster. I think they'll know where to line up. They'll have their communication down. And when you have that with the talent that they've added, I thought the secondary was outstanding during OTAs and minicamp. Each day, Keely Ringo, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, Isaiah Rodgers, they all were making plays. Avonte Maddox taking snaps all over the field. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, I thought, looked good. Reed Blankenship had an interception. And every single day, Devin White made a play in coverage. He had a sack in 11 on 11. I think people look at this defense as a question mark. There is a way, way, way better chance they are a top 5 defense and they're a bottom 5 defense. I think this defense is going to be much, much better than people think.
I love it. Speaking of defense, Hassan Reddick.
Yeah.
Well, he just won't go away. Is it a mistake that he walked, or now after he's holding out at minicamp for the Jets, are you reevaluating the Hassan Reddick departure from the Philadelphia Eagles?
Look, I think the biggest lesson here is don't question Howie, right? I mean,
he's just a genius.
It's still a year out, and if Bryce Huff isn't good and Hassan Reddick plays for the Jets, he's awesome. And there is still a world where a year from now we're sitting there and going, that was a mistake. But once again, it looks like Howie's going to come up on top of this trade. We'll see how Bryce Huff plays. But for the Jets to trade for Hassan Reddick and then have him hold out for mandatory minicamp is embarrassing for a franchise. Like, that is a poorly run franchise move. The Eagles, while I think they could miss Hassan, and Hassan's a great player, if the vibe they got, and it's clear that it was that he was absolutely not going to show up without a new deal, is that he wanted this amount of money, or that he wasn't going to be happy. Like, that's the other aspect of this. Last year, the Eagles had locker room issues. The players did not get along with each other. The vibe was bad. Hassan Reddick playing this year on a deal where he wasn't happy with, maybe that doesn't help the vibes at all. Maybe, in fact, makes it worse. So to get Bryce Huff, who you did pay for, but to potentially end up getting a 3rd or 2nd round pick for Hassan Reddick, I didn't like the trade. I ripped the trade. once again, it looks like Howie might end up being right.
Unbelievable. I mean, truly, maybe another masterclass. We'll see. We'll find out. Defense again. A guy we thought was dead to rights. He'd be gone by now. Bradbury.
Yeah.
Did you see him taking reps at safety? What do you make of that change in position for Bradbury? For me, I'm excited. I was a guy that didn't really want him gone. I know you were too.
So if Bradbury was playing corner, I would be excited about it. Now, I will say the young corners really stepping up and looking awesome does change my opinion on that. Like, I want Isaiah Rodgers.
Sorry to cut you off, but it went from a position that was like the biggest concern to now, I feel like we're in the catbird seat now. We're loaded at that spot.
I agree. And I want to see Keeley, Isaiah Rodgers, Quinyon, Cooper all get reps over Bradbury because they're young. They need the experience, and I think they could be better this year. James Bradbury at safety, to me, is basically just a placeholder spot until he's on another team. I don't think you'll see Bradbury take snaps at safety for the Eagles this year. Look, he tried to move into nickel last year. That did not go well. I personally just don't think his strength is at safety. He's not a great tackler. I don't think he has great downhill speed to come in. And I get that you're covering less of the field at safety, but I don't like it. I think Bradbury can still be a good outside starting corner, but I think they moved him to safety because they want these other guys getting reps. So look, we'll see in training camp if maybe they'll hold on to him. Maybe he will take reps there. I'm at the point now where I'd be pretty surprised if Bradbury's on that plane to Brazil.
Yeah, maybe they'll hold on to him. I hope. And if somebody goes down in training camp from another team and, you do another Howie Roseman masterclass and flip him for something, in the future, that would be
a fourth. Yeah, absolutely.
He's sitting pretty there, Howie, once again. Jalix Hunt, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. How have they looked in minicamp so far?
So I think Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is a player that's going to look better when the pads come on, right? Just like his dad. He's not somebody that in 7-on-7, it's not his strength. He's not a coverage linebacker. He doesn't have elite speed, but where he's going to shine is when the pads go on. So I'm excited to see him in training camp. Jalix Hunt is somebody that the second you walk on the field, you go, who's that guy? Like he is huge. He has the ideal body for a defensive end. Long arms, long legs, super athletic, fast. Like he just stands out. Now, he has to prove it. He has a long way to go. But early on, the physical return of just looking at Jalix Hunt and the athlete that they've drafted, he was on WIP, extremely impressive guy, very smart, played safety, I believe it was at Cornell. So he has the football intelligence. I think he could end up being one of their best picks. I think it's going to be a steal. But I'm excited to see him when the pads go on along with Trotter Jr.
Exciting stuff. That will be one to watch. Jalix Hunt. Can't wait to see him in preseason. That's gonna be the guy to watch for when they play that first preseason game, second preseason game. All right, Kenny Pickett, my boy, Kenny. I wanted Justin Fields just for the record, but Kenny looking a little bit impressive here. Explain to us the Kenny Pickett versus Jalen Hurts stats during minicamp. I know you don't track the OTAs, but you're tracking minicamp, right?
I absolutely. Oh, come on. If I'm at a minicamp, I'm tracking it. So I have the stats right here for you. Let me pull them up. So over the 3-day minicamp, Jalen Hurts, 30 of 37, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Kenny Pickett, 31 of 43, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. So more touchdowns, few interceptions, more completions. I don't think Kenny Pickett outplayed Jalen to the point where we have a quarterback controversy. That's not what it is. I think the main takeaway is Kenny can play. And Kenny in this offense, if he has to play, will play well. I think he throws a really nice, catchable, accurate ball. I mean, he had 2 of the best throws of the mandatory minicamp, 2 great touchdowns back-to-back. One, he threw up to Johnny Wilson, the tall rookie receiver out of Florida State, put it high up where only he could get it, which he went and did and came down with it for a touchdown. And then had what I think was the best throw of camp, a back shoulder throw to Joseph Ngata right on the pylon at the front of the end zone. Ngata caught it, turned around, brought it in for a touchdown. It was just very impressive. Now, he has to obviously do it in a game. And we've seen in Pittsburgh, he struggled somewhat. I think he was ripped unfairly, but he needs to be better than he was in Pittsburgh. But with these receivers, this, Saquon, a good offensive line, a good coaching staff offensively, I think Kenny Pickett's going to be really good if he has to come in.
Is Kenny Pickett going to help us win at least one game this year, you think?
If he plays, if put it this way: if
he's
Kenny
gonna
Pickett
play.
had to play,
Eliot,
he'll play. Yeah, he'll play. You're right. I mean, backup quarterbacks always play. I think they'll win when Kenny Pickett plays. I think the offense will move the ball with Kenny Pickett. Absolutely.
All right, clip this one. We're gonna keep this one for
it's
for
gonna be old
the
takes
future.
exposed in a few weeks.
Now, in terms of minicamp, who has been the biggest standout, maybe a surprise to make the team, or just a surprise to be a big contributor that you may or may not have thought would be prior to minicamp?
So to me, the guy who helped himself the most, like we talked about the corners, they were all outstanding, but they're all making the team. Quinion, Cooper, those guys. John Ross was the story for me of mandatory minicamp in terms of going from a guy that probably was not going to make the roster to a guy that might be active on game days. I thought he looked outstanding. The speed was still there. He had a few really nice catches. He went from going with the third team offense to start the OTA practices I saw to getting first team reps at the end of mandatory minicamp. They need a veteran help there. I know he's been retired and he's not played, 80 games in the NFL, but he's been a professional for 6 years. He knows what it's like. So I think John Ross could help this offense. The speed down the middle of the field as that number 3 receiver. He still has a ways to go. Paris Campbell, I think, has that spot locked up, but John Ross really, really helped himself during the mandatory minicamp, and I think is well on his way to a roster spot.
All right, we'll see if the speedster can make an impact. All right, last question. Biggest takeaway from minicamp, Eliot, go.
Man, this team is talented. And I know that, you wanted something a little more spicy probably, but when you watch this Eagles team practice after how bad it was last year at the end, it's just eye-opening to remember that when it comes to rosters in the NFL, there's not many you would take over the Eagles. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts on the offense, watching them together. Offense didn't play great, but that's an extreme amount of talent there. And then on the defensive side, as I talked about, I think they have a ton of talent. So offensively, I think the talent is there, and defensively, the talent is there. But my other big takeaway that I did not believe at the beginning of this, and at the end, I firmly believe it now, A.J. Brown is the best leader on this team. When it comes to guys you want in the locker room, being leaders for the guy out on the practice field, great player, represents the franchise well. I was really, really, really impressed with A.J. Brown over these few days. He's out at rookie minicamp just watching. I see him helping receivers in between reps. He was here for all of the voluntary stuff and all of the mandatory stuff. And he's a great player. We can talk about guys that are backups being great leaders, and that absolutely matters. Your best players have to be your best leaders. And A.J. Brown is the best leader on this team. I think the Eagles, obviously there's talks about what he does on the sideline and not talking to the media. And look, I understand the discussions around that. But if there's one Eagle I want leading this team, it's A.J. Brown. So I was very impressed with A.J.
You love to see it, Eliot. Another great show in the books, Eliot. Love talking to you, as always, every week. It's Bet the Birds. It's Eliot Shorr-Parks. It's Maniac Malloy, courtesy of betPARX. Eliot, well done, and we'll talk to you again next.